There's so much wrapped up into literally what you just threw out there. And I joke, but private equity is going around and buying up multi-generational manufacturing and distribution businesses and trades businesses, and then stacking them together and figuring out how to leverage technology to reduce friction in the process. And while that may not always have a happy ending, I do think that it is something that you need to really start to think about as we're starting to see generational shift in these businesses. And so it's not just about it's not an overnight thing. These are challenging and difficult things to do.
Welcome to the Profit Answer Man podcast. We believe the purpose of business is to make lots of money. We'll show you how to scale and grow your profit and cash flow, all while working less. We're a big fan of the ELF model: easy, lucrative, and fun. If you're the backbone of America, you deserve to be well rewarded for that. Listen in to see how other business owners are doing it and how to maximize your profit and cash flow. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Ethan Giffin. It's great to have you join us today.
Well, Rocky, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to join the show today.
And I'm excited for the conversation as well. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ethan Giffin. I'm the founder and CEO of the B2B eCommerce agency, and we help mid-market manufacturers and distributors that want to create private buyer portals or digital revenue strategies for their customers to buy from them. So we come in and we help understand what their customers are thinking about, how they're ordering, and work with them to build an overall strategy that aligns to that. We find that that every day more and more people are buying from Amazon and Uber and the Starbucks app and Airbnb and all of these things. And they expect when they go to work with their vendors that they have similar types of systems to help buy from them as well.
So these big companies have spoiled our customers.
Pretty much. If you really think about it, though, it may not even just be big companies. It's the concept that, the average 23-year-old college graduate entering the workforce today was 5 or 6 years old when the iPhone came out, right? So they've lived their entire lives, their entire teen and adult lives with a smartphone, right? And so I think it is making sure that you are not going to be left behind and that you're not creating too much overall friction for your customers, and building a strategy to help them come in and order and reorder from you over and over again.
It's funny. Occasionally I get on Twitter, and there's a lot of people in the buy a business space on Twitter.
Yeah.
And the meme is always go buy a company in the trades like an HVAC or whatever, and replace their fax machine with digital ordering, and you'll make millions of dollars just bringing technology into the space. Now, yeah, maybe not.
Are you a private equity? That sounds exactly like what private equity is doing these days.
That is what they're doing, and that makes sense. But the way they make it sound on Twitter is just replacing the fax machine is going to solve all the problems. You still got to run the business. And that's the part they seem to forget, is all the rest of the things that have to occur. And the transition from sending faxes and being successful to getting your clients to use a different way of doing business with you. The other thing is I've noticed is I think more and more people don't want to get on the phone, and they want to just do things without conversation. Although I think that game is changing, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. The leading edge of AI is now we can't tell what's real, what's fake, what's a true website. People want to go back to human connection. And so maybe we're going to go back to that. I don't know.
Oh my, there's so much wrapped up into literally what you just threw out there. And I joke, but private equity is going around and buying up multi-generational manufacturing and distribution businesses and trades businesses, and then stacking them together and figuring out how to leverage technology to reduce friction in the process. And while that may not always have a happy ending, I do think that it is something that you need to really start to think about as we're starting to see generational shift in these businesses. And so, it's not just about like, it's not an overnight thing. These are challenging and difficult things to do. But let's say you're a 50, $75 million, $100 million, sixth generation, fifth generation manufacturer. It's you're up, you're the next generation, you're 45, 50 years old, taking charge of the organization. And you have customers that buy from you on an ongoing basis, and they're literally filling out spreadsheets or scratching on sheets of note paper and taking pictures of it and texting that to a salesperson. And it's like, why not figure out how to reduce the friction? I believe Gartner did a survey, and it was like 57% of B2B buyers would prefer to not talk to somebody on the phone for every transaction. And so what we try to do is come into the organization, and it's not about technology for us. It's all about alignment. And so it's how do we create the alignment with the leadership team to make sure the head of sales and the head of ops and the head of marketing and the head of finance and the head of IT are all kind of working together in the same direction. And then how do you put your products online and let your customers just come in and reorder them with their custom pricing, their credit terms, and all of those types of things? They still need to interact with their salesperson, but they don't need to do it for every single order. And that allows you to have your salespeople actually sell more, giving them potentially higher quotas, helping them to dig deeper into some of their the long tail customers in their book of business. And so there are strategies that work for this, and people are looking to go in this direction. So they don't want to necessarily talk to some AI bot on the phone, but they also, when I book my HVAC appointments, I don't want to have to call in and talk to somebody. Just give me the scheduling software and let me pick the block, that I can go for.
And here's the thing I think business owners need to realize. If you're not keeping up, that person has moved on, because we are in the world of speed to answering the phone, speed to booking the appointment. And if you go, I'm just not going to do this, I'm going to ignore this, and your competitor does it, people are going to just leave, and they're not even going to tell you that they left. Or they may never show up to begin with. You might just never know they were gone. And that's the problem. It's the fact that you don't hear the noise. It just doesn't occur. And then you're like, why is my marketing not working? It's not your marketing.
It's kind of just a pain in the ass to buy something from you. I talk like I love to make pizzas. I've got a pizza oven on my back porch, all wired into the gas, and it's just a fantastic thing. And, I love making pizzas and serving people like that. And, here in Baltimore, they've instituted a 5-cent grocery bag. You got to pay a nickel for every grocery bag you use. And there's one grocery chain that carries the special pepperonis that I like to get that kind of curl up on the sides, like you get, on things. And so I only go to this grocery store and pick up, 2, 3, 4 items at a time. And I'm always excited about that because I'm going to be making pizza. And one of the biggest problem with it is that while most of the grocery stores in Baltimore, when you go to self-checkout, they say, how many bags, even at Lowe's, even at Home Depot, how many bags did you use today? 0 to 5. And you pick on the screen. Well, this grocery store locks the bags up in this big center aisle cabinet. And to get a bag, you actually have to wave down the self-checkout attendant, who has to come over, scan his key card, put a bunch of codes in, go over to the cabinet, unlock the paper bag, and give it to you. And it creates so much friction in the sales process that it turned an activity that I'm like, oh, I'm making pizza, to, oh God, I got to go to this pain in the ass grocery store again and wait for the damn attendant to come unlock the 5-cent bag and treat me like I'm a felon, because I'm frustrated where I want to get my bag and go. And so every business that we talk to has some kind of friction like that makes it hard for customers to buy from them. And you may say, hey, we're the only ones in the US that manufacture this specific widget, but every business sells things around those widgets. And what we see is kind of like quiet quitting, that they talked about, a couple generations ago. People are quiet quitting on the sales side and just walking away, and they're going to order their consumables and things from other vendors where they can have a shopping list, just log in, add to cart, and then be gone with it, right? And so it's not about having elaborate systems or trying to be Amazon. It's really about trying to be to reduce the friction so people enjoy the transaction process of buying from you.
And any small business owner that's in e-com knows what the abandoned cart rates are. At least you should know how many people put something into their cart and didn't finish the checkout cycle.
Yep.
And I know for us, we talk to our owners about the retargeting campaigns and all the follow-ups with that. But every little piece of friction matters. And it's the same thing. When you call the HVAC company on the phone and nobody answers and talks to you, when you leave a message and you don't hear for 48 hours, you probably called somebody else until somebody actually talked to you and you got the business done. And so removing all of that friction is a major problem. You wrote a book about it.
Absolutely.
Called the
Closing the Digital Revenue Gap. 10 revenue blind spots that are costing you more than you think. So
what are some of those biggest blind spots that most people don't even realize is a blind spot?
Well, it's interesting. And so I wrote this book because I started off on the direct to consumer e-commerce side. And over time, many of our customers were also manufacturers. And so they started asking us, hey, can we create a private system for our customers to buy from us? Or, hey, we've home built this private system. It's not working great anymore. Can you help us? Can you help us make it better? And so over the years, I've talked to many manufacturers and distributors, and we've helped move forward. And it's everything from, they have a very modern Industry 4.0 factory with automation, but they're still using like order forms and spreadsheets on the sales side of things, right? Or Uncle Bob is the only person that knows how to price products in the entire business, and there's no kind of written logic, or information on how we actually price our products. It could be treating a B2B e-commerce, and that's what we call this B2B e-commerce, treating a B2B e-commerce project like this, just like another website rebuild, and just giving it to the head of marketing and say, have at it, right? So we talk a lot about alignment in this book as well, of getting, I call it the 5-legged stool, right? It's getting kind of sales, marketing, operations, finance, and IT kind of working together to build a true digital revenue channel within an organization. And if you're a mid-market, like $50 to $500 million manufacturer, you ought to have at least 10% of your revenue coming through digital channels. And for many folks, it's much higher than that. And so that doesn't mean you're taking away from a salesperson. Again, you're actually keep making your salesperson, they still get commission and credit when their customers order through these online systems. It's just a heck of a lot cheaper to do it this way. It's an average of $5 an order through an e-commerce platform, and it might be $50 in order to go through the call center by the time everybody touches. And so, it's efficiency, it's optimization, it's reducing friction, and quite frankly, it's just making your customers happy because they can kind of go about their day, much, much faster there.
I just booked something the other day. I went in for a treatment at a new place, and literally the amount of friction to get through booking an appointment was ungodly. Had there been another place, I would have gone somewhere else. But it was the only place around that did what they did. And I went in, I'm like, who built your website? Because it's atrocious what you have to go through to do that. And people don't realize, that's the other thing that's funny, is a lot of these people don't test their own systems. And so they don't even realize how difficult they are to do business with. And that's a big part of it.
It's a big part of it. It's a huge part of it. As part of our process, we bring all of those 5 parties into our studios in Baltimore and do an immersive 3-day discovery session with them. And we ask the CEO to come, and they'll often push back and say, I don't have time. And I'm like, listen, you're a $130 million company. Like a 15 or 20 million isn't a 15 or $20 million revenue channel worth a day and a half. We try to get them in for the first day and a half of your time to come set the tone on that. And then they're like, I didn't think about it like that. And what happens is that we start to get into these friction conversations, and often they have no idea how difficult it is. The CEO or leadership have no difficult. You'll have the customer service person, that's been there 20 years start rattling off of all the things they do. Or they get into this kind of hero syndrome where there becomes heroes in the organization, but all those heroes are actually doing is overcoming significant kind of friction in the process for your customers and helping them to kind of just get an order through. And so I feel like you're wasting like your hero revolutions on things that just should be like common daily table stakes of like good ways to do business. And so, with kind of workarounds and, all of these kind of things that go on in just businesses, there's, every manufacturing and distribution business that's got some age to it has somebody that knows everything that's going on there and has been there, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years like that. And, all of it's in their file cabinet in like a drawer in their desk or in their file cabinet or sometimes in their brain. And you just can't scale and grow, that way. And what's going to happen is when private equity comes to buy that business, right, they're going to take that and they're going to stuff that into a greater portfolio of somebody that already has that infrastructure. So you're getting much better multiples if you have those types of systems, and your customers are just going to be happier.
I know you keep calling them the hero. I call them the arsonist. More often than not, they're the people who create the friction in the fire and then go, look what I solved. And that tends to happen a lot within organizations. And people don't realize that until you start to build a system and realize that it's job security for them to make it this difficult to do things. And you have to be clear on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, again, like you shouldn't celebrate friction, right? You should celebrate like fixing and optimizing that.
And that's the key. How do we remove the friction to make things flow? So who becomes the oil in the company that keeps the machine moving at top speed and without any hiccups? That's part of the problem. And it doesn't matter the size of the business, but more often than not, the owners are always too busy to actually work on the business and to be able to make sure that everything is done correctly in the way that they want it and setting that tone and so forth. Do the CEOs usually capitulate and show up, or have you had situations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the conversations become interesting, right? And I think what becomes apparent is there's definitely a couple of areas that hold these kind of projects back, right? And it's sales not being invited into the conversation. Somebody's saying, hey, this is a great way to bring the commission back to the house. No. Your customers are not going to use this if your salespeople don't like reinforce using it, right? So you can increase your salespeople's quotas. Like you can increase their territory, you can do more with less, but sales has to get credit for the items that get bought online the same way they do over the phone. And then you've got to figure out like the catalog. Generally, like the catalogs are very messy and they're not for human consumption. They might be in an ERP system, but a bunch of kind of internal acronyms and other information, and not have like the full data like you would on a product that you go and get off of Amazon. And then so that the catalog is big. It's the alignment, it's sales, it's the catalog, and then it's the ERP system. And so generally, maybe they have got an out-of-date ERP system or someone that's kind of creates roadblocks within the organization to prevent, others from from creating change. So it really is a it's an alignment and change management issue, and then technology second. So, we've got we think it takes about 3 years from zero to go from 0 to 60, basically, like to go from nothing. And so we generally spend about the first year doing a deep dive into their organization, coming up with the requirements, helping them pick the technology, and then building it. And then, generally around that, that takes, anywhere between, 8 to 10 months. Then we pilot it with a handful of customers. Then we help them activate it with all of their customers. And it really takes about a year to get all the customers in there, like ordering, like, and working through, all the parts of that. And then it's like the year 3 is like, how do we optimize and really grow? Are there additional marketplaces we should be looking at to put your products into? Is there, there's all kinds of ways to think about it. And so that's kind of one side that people talk to us. The other way people call us is they say, hey, I'm working with SpaceX or Tesla or Boeing, and the purchasing manager told me that if we don't implement punch outs or EDI, then they're going to stop buying from us. And that's electronic ways to receive order data, from electronic systems, system to system, to how let the procurement people buy electronically. And so people will come to us and say, if we don't get this done in 5 or 6 months, they said they're going to stop, buying $20 million a year worth of stuff from us. And so we will help them. So there's generally like, hey, is there too much friction, or is there an immediate kind of customer driven need that we need a system like this, and we're going to have to do it.
It's interesting you talk about the time frame, because everyone thinks you can implement things quickly, and things take time to implement. But it's also interesting you take the time to do the background research to figure it out correctly. I see most business owners just throw money at the problem and think it's going to get solved, and that the expert is going to know what to do. They're not experts in your business. They're experts in that system.
Yeah.
But if they don't understand your business, they can't adapt that system to you. And that's kind of one of the bigger problems that comes up, is how do you make sure that you build it correctly and you put the time and effort? This is a big thing that's coming up with AI, because everyone thinks AI is going to solve the problem. And what I'm starting to hear in the larger organizations like you're talking about, if they don't have systems and processes in place already, AI is amplifying chaos.
Yep.
And it's turning it into bigger chaos. So no matter the size of your company, you have to have your systems and processes in place. The earlier you do it, the better the buy-in. Because what's happening in these companies is they've gotten a little bit larger. They can't get buy-in. And because these people have been there and they're like, this is the way we do it. Whereas if you just start from the beginning of saying, this is how we do things and this is our process, you don't have to go through the pain of change, because it is massive.
It's massive. And the opportunity is massive. And, we will see people spend, massive amounts of money on sending paper catalogs like through the mail, right? Versus investing. I'm not saying to fully get rid of that, but I'm like, well, listen, let's take part of that budget and get a videographer on staff, a photographer and videographer on staff, because that's where the world is going, right? So, how can we evolve, right? And how can we kind of move forward? And so, it's not about losing the essence of the organization or the good parts of the organization. It's all about reducing friction and creating alignment. And it's just these projects can be, challenging at times to kind of work through that as you're kind of, as you're going through it, and you've got to be patient and you've got to be brutally honest. And there are times where people say, hey, this is as far as we can take it. And that's okay too. I actually think it's better to be successful earlier than to do some 2-year project that like people don't even remember why we started like doing it. And so people will say, we've got access to 500,000 products and we got to get all of those on the website. And I'm like, well, how many of them actually have you sold in the last year? And they'll say, well, our ERP says we sold about 10 or 11,000 of those, and only about half of those we've sold more than once. And I'm like, let's start with that. Let's like start with the 5,000, right, and get those right. Or let's start with 10 or 12 customers of yours that won't fire you, that love you and won't fire you, and make them a part of this process of beta testing and say, hey, we're going to have white glove service through this, but you've asked about it. We're going to do it. Can you help us? And get them a part of that conversation. Let's just get the products that they buy from online and get them buying those and make those products look really fantastic. So it is about figuring out a path to success and kind of holding people back from, making decisions on these projects that will kill the momentum.
So I know with a lot of small companies, they're implementing a lot more software products. There's tons of industry specific software out there to help them manage all of these things. What I'm starting to see is the cost of software, especially over the last couple of years, has skyrocketed. How do you determine when is the right time to use an off-the-shelf type of system versus custom built? Because the cost of custom built's got to be considerable, or not necessarily.
So we don't do custom built. We take, we want to take 80% of what's existing commercially and then configure that and then customize that last 10 to 20% on top of that, right? And so the question is, do you have a commercially available, what ERP platform are you running, right? And is it something that there are pre-made connectors that exist already? And or can we get your catalog to work with an existing system versus writing your own? And we're not fans of writing your own. We think that just becomes almost just that becomes somebody's job. And quite honestly, it becomes job security, in some ways, and gatekeeping with these things. So we implement commercially available systems that are that we can go in and kind of configure and customize the last mile on and make them work.
And I think that's the important thing, is find a system that's close enough and then get it to adapt to the way you do things. I think a lot of times people don't do enough research. They bring in a software system and it doesn't meet their needs, or it causes massive amounts of friction inside the company, which becomes very difficult.
Yeah, there's got to be decisions made at a point of hey, maybe our SKU system doesn't match what modern e-commerce systems match how they work, right? And the question is, just because it's worked for 30 years doesn't mean we shouldn't change that. Because if we had just adjusted just a little, sometimes it's even just a little, it allows them to fit right into a system and be utilized. Now, there's a lot of nuance in these projects in terms of parts, every little nut and bolt and screw and the nuances of those products that are very important. But often there's some psychological parts of this where somebody needs to say, we've got to move forward from this, or we acknowledge that our pricing books are a mess and we've got to figure out what's the common denominator in this and how can we go forward, for the next 30 or 40 years in a more logical way.
And that makes sense. Are there other things that we should have touched on when thinking of implementing something like this that we did not, or maybe some of the mistakes that you might see as we're going through that system?
Well, I think, we covered a good bit. I think the biggest thing is not picking the technology before you actually know what it is that you need to build to support your customers, right? And the other part is it doesn't have to be all in. You can figure out a path of implementing a system with key customers and figure out your path of how you kind of stage that and have success. And so we want to try to break down walls between the teams, as much as possible. But if you every time you grow, it requires you to hire more people in your call center to like hand type orders into a system, at some point that is not fully scalable anymore, right? And so you can't just always throw bodies at these things, nor should you. And so over time, over the next 5 to 10 years, I would say definitely in 10 years, over the next 5 years, we're going to see a significant shift of how B2B shoppers, purchasers are buying, and organizations are going to need to start making some moves. I'm not going to say it's all going to go away because of AI and all that other stuff, but I'm telling you, as you know, what's going to happen when somebody that was 0 years old, like that was born with an iPhone, versus at 5 or 6, like what's going to happen when they enter the workforce, right? Like, and so we're going to see a significant shift in how people buy and work with vendors.
And so you've got to understand your clients and what they're looking for and actually have the conversations. Because if you're not having the conversations, you won't even know what happened. And especially for companies that have sales reps, it's figuring out the noise from the signal of what the reps are telling you. Like, you need to get out in the field once in a while and talk to customers and say, how do we best serve you? What are the things that are there? And the further away, that's what I've noticed, is businesses grow, the further away the owner gets from the client, the more bloated and the more problems that occur. And so occasionally you got to get back to the front line and see what your front line is telling you, because they've got tons of information of gold, but you've got to go listen.
Yep. If any of this resonated with any of your listeners, I'm happy to give them a free copy of my book. They can go to b2beecombook.com, b2beecombook.com, and fill out the form on that page, and I'll happily send them a copy. It's what they call a compact book. It's about 90 pages. It's easy to read on a plane ride. I actually wrote a 300-page book and was told, hey, that's too much. People don't want to spend, that much time with you. And so I boiled down the stories, from those 10 stories from that and put that together in this book. It's 10 chapters. It's why each of those chapters and stories is important, and 3 things to think about if you're if you feel like you align with those stories. And so again, happy to send out a free copy to any of your listeners that would like one.
And if they want to see your website, what is that?
It's b2beecomagency.com is our website. B2B, the number 2, ecommerceagency.com. So
cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.